Changing a country isn't easy, but change is inevitable, and the choices we make today will shape our country for generations to come. That's why the Australia Institute is publishing our first book as part of our 30th anniversary celebrations. What's the Big Idea offers 32 ideas for a better Australia from leading thinkers such as Yanis Varoufakis, Auntie Pat Anderson, and Professor Peter Doherty. The essays are a roadmap and a reminder that the solutions exist. Australia just needs the courage to implement them. Visit australiainstitute.org.au or follow the link in the show notes to pre-order your copy of What's the Big Idea today.
More than a third of Australians in the last election did not vote for a major party. And don't for a minute think that was lost on the major parties. You know, they are alive to this, absolutely alive to this, and they're scared by this. There's no doubt about that.
One for Mum, one for Dad, and one for the country.
And there has never been a more exciting time to be an Australian.
Budgets are about choices, Fran, and you show what you value through the choices you make.
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared.
The Treasurer knows I want an economy that works for people, not the other way around.
We'll just end up being a third-rate economy, a banana republic.
Just follow the money.
G'day and welcome to Follow the Money, the Australia Institute's podcast that explains economics, politics and policy in plain English. I'm your host, Ebony Bennett, Deputy Director at the Australia Institute. And it's been pitched as a once-in-a-generation reform to Australia's electoral laws and a way to get the big money out of Australian politics.
Today, the government introduces the Electoral Legislation Amendment, Electoral Reform Bill 2024.
This is all about making sure that ordinary Australians can participate. The Australian electoral system should not work on the basis that the only people that can get elected into Parliament are people that are sponsored by billionaires.
It proposes the largest reform to Australia's electoral laws in over 40 years.
This bill ensures that Australian politics remains a cosy table for two. And it makes it clear to ordinary Australians that you're not invited.
The only time that you see both major parties usually voting with each other is when it's in their own interests.
I'm concerned that this is a bit of a stitch-up by the duopoly in the land of the duopolies.
But is the government's electoral reform bill, which they're trying to push through in the final parliamentary sitting week of the year, all it's hyped up to be? Joining me to talk about the changes and the future of Australian democracy is the independent member for Indi, Helen Haines. And for listeners, you might hear in the background bells ringing. Helen was joining us directly from her office in Parliament and the bells were ringing for the Senate to go and vote. So fortunately, Helen was able to stay on the line with us, but you will hear the bells ringing in the background. It does stop eventually, but you'll be able to hear it nevertheless. G'day, Helen. Thanks so much for joining us.
G'day, Emily. It's great to join you. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, and thank you in particularly what I know is a massive week, the last week of Parliament, so we appreciate your time. So I guess just for listeners who might not be across some of the detail, what exactly is the Albanese government proposing with this legislation?
Well, Ebony, this has been legislation the Albanese government promised during the last election that they would do something about cleaning up the big money in politics. And let's be honest, we all want that to happen. We don't want to see massive, wealthy donors dominating our democracy by essentially purchasing votes through huge electoral donations. So, of course, everyone is in support of such a notion. But what we've actually seen is a few parts to this bill that don't go truly to reform, that in fact go to what very clearly is maintaining the major party duopoly. But before I get there, let me just say there's elements to this bill that I really love and have gone even further than what I hoped, and that's around the transparency of political donations. And for a long time, since I've been a Member of Parliament, at least I've been calling for as near as possible to real-time transparency of donations. In my own case, I declare donations well below the mandated $16,900 by the AEC. Any donation above $1,000 you'll see on my website. I update that quarterly. and any donation above that AEC threshold, I update every 5 days. Not they don't come in too often, I might say. But nevertheless, this is something that can be done if an independent member of parliament with not many resources can do that. I absolutely think the major parties can. So this bill will establish tighter rules again that in fact require donations to be transparent and uploaded onto a fully visible site, very regularly leading into an election. And I think that's really good. So I'm happy about that bit.
Yeah. No, there's often, some really good elements to a bill and then things that are missing or need to be improved. We at the Australia Institute also noticed that truth in political advertising wasn't part of this package of reforms. And you've been critical of some of the aspects of the bill, in particular, how this bill might disproportionately benefit the major parties. Could you just run me through what some of your concerns are on that front?
Yeah, so again, I would say I'm in favour of capping the amount of money that a single donor can donate to any candidate's election. And I am, in general, I'm supportive of expenditure caps, provided that they are applied in a way that brings equity across our electoral system. And we can talk some more about that. But again, I don't want to see the Australian democracy spiralling into this American style where there's just millions and millions of dollars spent in order to win a seat in the parliament.
The Harris and Trump campaigns are sharing their July fundraising hauls, with the VP shattering records.
After her first week as a 2024 presidential candidate, Vice President Kamala Harris has raised $200 million.
Tesla CEO spoke at a Pennsylvania rally with former President Trump, and according to new government filings, he has been pouring a lot of money, $75 million, into his super PAC backing Trump's campaign.
What's also notable is that he has kind of wholly taken over this organization. It's called America PAC. He is the only donor to this group, and it's a group focused on the ground game, especially in Pennsylvania.
The super PAC of Elon Musk, the world's richest man, is moving forward now with its daily $1 million giveaway to people who sign a petition supporting the First and Second Amendment. The Justice Department sent that group a letter warning them earlier this week the sweepstakes might be illegal, but 2 more $1 million prizes were handed out yesterday.
So those two things in their essence are a good idea. However, the way it's applied through this particular bill very significantly advantages major parties, and here's why. If we were to look at the expenditure cap in particular, this bill proposes that there's an $800,000 spending cap in any seat. Now, for most people, that would seem like a lot of money, and it is. Certainly in my own case, I didn't come close to spending that money in Indi. But we know that there are hotly contested seats in this country, and in the last election alone, there was challengers and incumbents spending $2 million apiece in order to win particular seats, and that's an inordinate amount of money. Mm-hmm. Here's the itch, though. If there's an $800,000 spending cap applied to a seat, that's absolutely as much as any independent member of parliament can spend, and indeed, importantly, a new player, a new independent candidate coming in without the advantages of incumbency, no more than $800,000. You would similarly, if there was a party candidate, $800,000 on any materials, any advertising materials that bear their name or their image, but no limit on how much advertising material can bear the colour, the branding, the name of the major party that they belong to. So effectively, yeah, I know it's isn't it? Effectively,
it's quite tricky in the detail.
Yeah, it is. Effectively, a major party candidate can blanket the electorate, the billboards, the election polling day wraps, newspaper ads, anywhere they want to go with vote Liberal or vote Labor or vote National, whatever it might be. Whereas an independent candidate who doesn't belong to a party cannot do that. They can only spend within that cap on materials because, that's the proposition from the government. So independent candidates have real concerns about this. And in my case, I have all the advantages of incumbency. People know my name. But if I'm a newcomer, a new independent candidate running for a seat against a major party person, I have to establish my name. I have to make myself identifiable. People are not voting for a party; they're voting for a person in that case. So there's real problems there.
Yeah, because you were obviously elected as an independent, and so you would know firsthand how challenging that can be going up against an incumbent. So, yeah, that's really the concern, isn't it? We've seen more and more Australians are choosing kind of to drift away from the major parties. And, how much do you think this will impact the ability of new people entering politics to play on a level playing field, I guess?
Yeah, well, Ebony, you're absolutely right. More than a third of Australians in the last election did not vote for a major party. And don't for a minute think that was lost on the major parties. They are alive to this, absolutely alive to this, and they're scared by this. There's no doubt about that. So what Australians are telling us is that the major party duopoly is not serving our democracy well. They want to see alternatives, and we saw, of course, the biggest crossbench ever elected since Federation at the last Parliament. And I think that if you don't feel a little bit kind of nervous or suspicious when the two major parties get together behind closed doors and come out with what they like to call a bipartisan agreement on electoral reforms, then you're not paying attention. Because what the crossbench would say to you is when more than a third of Australians are not voting for the major party, then we shouldn't be talking bipartisanship. We should be talking multi-partisanship. So that is an area that I think bears very close scrutiny. And it's the scrutiny that the crossbench have been giving this bill that has raised these many questions. So again, when the two major parties say nothing to see here, this is reform, this is going to make a level playing field for everyone. I think that thinking people can see what's going on here. I mean, there's a whole lot more to this too about what constitutes donations, who can donate, what role the unions have in this, associated entities, and so on. So there's a lot of detail here, and when you scrutinise the detail, the balance tips very favourably towards the two major parties.
And Helen, for people who haven't necessarily been following this in detail, so the independents, you don't have the resources of a major party. There's over 200 pages of this legislation. Can you just tell people, we're hearing a lot about the major parties kind of doing a gentleman's agreement or behind closed doors.
Yeah.
But is there any scrutiny of this bill, any inquiry?
Yeah.
What do we think is going to happen here?
Oh, no inquiry required. Ebony, it's all good. There's been consultation going on for years, according to the government. And indeed, the Standing Committee on Electoral Reform, the Joint Standing Committee, JSCEM, indeed did an investigation, an inquiry at the beginning of this Parliament on the last election, and put forward a set of principles and recommendations around where electoral reform might occur. So the government claim that is the scrutiny, that is the consultation, and of course that JSCEM report, though, goes nowhere near what the metrics might be around what constitutes an amount for a political donation, what's fair and reasonable, what constitutes fair and reasonable expenditure caps. It certainly goes nowhere near this extraordinary part of the legislation, which is about the administrative costs that will be paid for an incumbent, a successful candidate, to fulfil the transparency of donation. So $30,000 per candidate every year while the Parliament sits, and that applies whether you're a member of a major party, which has the full party machine to undertake the administration, or whether you're an independent candidate. And boy, if ever there was a scam, it's this one, that $30,000 per major party candidate going into the coffers of central control, and you can't tell me that there's not an economy of scale that would mean that those administrative costs do not need to be at that amount. And you've only got to look to the South Australian example to see that they did the maths on this and certainly didn't come up with a marvellous scheme where every single member of parliament got this $30,000 a year.
Yeah.
And again, that was arrived at after careful scrutiny and a parliamentary inquiry. But we're not going anywhere near this.
Yeah.
No scrutiny here. This bill was laid on the dispatch table, was debated, and fascinatingly, Ebony, the only speakers on this bill outside of the Assistant Minister was, guess who? The crossbench. We didn't hear a word from a representative from, no other members of parliament from the major parties spoke on this bill. And again,
wow.
What does that tell you?
The minister says this bill is getting big money out of politics, but actually it's replacing donor money with taxpayer money, which then embeds the incumbents.
This increase in public and administrative funding is going to disproportionately benefit the major parties. Plain and simple.
So we're actually asking the public
in a cost of living
crisis to fund a narrowing of their choices. It's a pretty outrageous little deal.
And as an incumbent, this does probably work for me, but that's not my concern. My concern is that elections should be a contest of ideas. We should have a range of candidates actually fighting on the issues for their community. And from what I've seen, and I think from the tone and sort of the timing of this is really about entrenching the major parties.
Just one final question, if I can, and then I know you have to keep going. I touched on this earlier, but this bill looks like it provides for essentially a massive increase in public funding and that kind of administrative funding that you're talking about as well. But there was an expectation that truth in political advertising laws would also be included in these reforms. So on the one hand, we've got a massive increase in public funding, but on the other, no safeguards for citizens that they won't be lied to in political advertising. Why do you think the government split off those changes from this bill?
Well, I mean, you would have to ask them, Ebony. But again, what a bittersweet situation we now find ourselves in. That yes, there is going to be curtailing of the amount of money allowed through a political donation, but don't worry, the taxpayer will pick that up. So the major parties won't lose out too much there because, in fact, they will gain. That's going from around $3.90 per vote if a candidate achieves more than 4% of the primary votes. So, major parties put up those candidates across every seat in the country. You'll then get $5 a vote under this mechanism. But at the same time, as you say, even though the government saw enormous urgency in getting this part of the bill through, no urgency whatsoever to reform truth in political advertising. So it remains that politicians are really the only people out there who can get away with lying in their advertising. You can't say a tube of toothpaste is going to remove any problems with your dental care for the rest of your life, but you can say that the sprinkling smile of a politician will promise you the world, and they don't deliver, but that's okay. So I think that's a real miss from this government, a great disappointment, and they're not doing democracy any favours by not getting on with the business of truth in political advertising.
And how would you like to see the government proceed from here, essentially?
Oh, well, I would like to say to the government, well, I have said to the government, what I want to see now, I mean, this bill is over in the Senate, they need to pause. None of these laws would, in fact, take effect before the next election, which is coming at us like a bullet train. These new laws would apply for the election after the next one. This can be paused right now, and a full parliamentary inquiry could take place and scrutinise this bill. That's what they should do, really, if they want to be truthful in their political advertising about what they're calling reform, then they need to stand themselves up to scrutiny, and this bill should have that inquiry. There's no reason in the world why it shouldn't, other than the government being a little afraid, I think, of what an inquiry might uncover.
Well, thanks so much for joining us on the show today, particularly, Helen, when I know it must be absolutely a madhouse up there in Parliament House.
Yeah, it kind of is, Ebony, but I always want to make time to talk about what it is that's being legislated. But you're quite right, there's legislation coming at us from all angles, and there seems to be a mad rush to get things done before Christmas.
Yeah. The Australia Institute is running a petition at the moment asking the government to send this donations bill to a proper inquiry for scrutiny, and we've had over 10,000 signatures in around about a week. So if you haven't signed that yet and you would like to, head on over to the Australia Institute's website at australiainstitute.org.au. And we would love to hear your thoughts on the show today. And you can reach out to us via email at podcasts@australiainstitute.org.au, or you can find us on Twitter at the Oz Institute. That's with an AUS. And we're also on Blue Sky now as well, if you're one of the people who has evacuated Twitter for Blue Sky. Don't forget, you can pre-order your copy of the Australia Institute's very first book from our new publishing imprint, Australia Institute Press. What's the Big Idea? Offers 32 ideas for a better Australia from leading thinkers such as Yanis Varoufakis, Sally McManus, Amy Ramikis, and Professor Peter Doherty. You can pre-order it now via our website and save $5 on the price, and that's at australiainstitute.org.au. Our theme music is by Jonathan McFeet from Pulse and Thrum, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. I'm Ebony Bennett. Thanks for listening.